Zane Clodfelter with OttersTV here with Gateway Grizzlies broadcaster Nate Gatter. And Nate, obviously, with the virtual game, it's the Otters and the Grizzlies. It feels like old times, except we're not at the ballpark together. We're doing this over Zoom.
Yeah, I didn't get to talk to Bill before we had this conversation for my game prep. That's always my final piece of game prep in Evansville is, get the book out of the way. I try to get the book out of the way in Evansville earlier than any other place because I know that I got to reserve at least 30 minutes for Bill. Sometimes it's going to be 60. I try to make sure that I have the schedule totally wide open so we can operate on Bill time.
What's the wackiest thing that you've heard from Bill in your pregame prep?
Oh, man. I think the wackiest is always when the rare occasions that I overhear him during a game. And that's like, for people who aren't familiar with the Otters press box, it's not completely closed off. I don't have my own booth, but I'm all the way at one end from him, and there are dividers in the way. So you essentially have your own booth as far as, between me and Bill, it's probably 20-plus feet. And I will still hear him on occasion, even during a game, definitely between innings, but even during an inning, every once in a while he'll come over and he'll be grabbing something out of the cooler during an inning, and he'll have just walked off the broadcast for 30 seconds or whatever, and he'll just think that's a good moment to grab me on the shoulder or something out of nowhere while I'm mid calling the game. I have no idea what's going on behind me. So that's fun. But we always I like to ask him about the old big league stories from when he was traveling, when he was assistant GM, when he was traveling around in the show. Or the old Evansville stories from when he was playing. I think those are really good too. So he always finds something interesting that he hadn't told me before, and then he manages to stretch it usually into a 20-minute story. So everybody wins.
So how have you handled this season? Obviously, no Gateway Grizzlies baseball, no Frontier League season. I'm sure it's been a weird adjustment for you. Yeah,
this has been my first summer without baseball in a long time. It was actually my birthday is at the end of May, and it was the first birthday I'd had without calling a baseball game since I turned 17. So that was really weird. And I don't know that it's gotten any less weird. You get used to it in the sense that you just think of it as not being baseball season. I think it got weirder when Major League Baseball started and we still weren't playing. Because then there was, it was clearly baseball season. And yet here I was. But otherwise, you're basically just biding time. And I think that's been the worst part of it is that over time, there's only so much that you can do to substitute for it, especially baseball, where it's such an everyday thing. I think one of my favorite parts about baseball, it can drag at times, but one of my favorite parts about baseball is the lifestyle element of it, right, and how everyday it is, and how it's not really possible, and this is in some ways not a good thing, but it's not really possible to have sort of your home life and your work life during a minor league baseball season, right, especially if you're someone who travels with the team. It's an all-encompassing thing, which, it's not to say that's 100% a positive thing, but I think you get used to it and you start to miss some elements of that in terms of the rhythm that it brings to a summer and the predictability and the sort of daily build of a season and how each day leads to the next. I think provides a certain structure that now all of a sudden has been completely ripped away. So that's, and I don't think there's any way to substitute for that. You just wait for next season, I guess.
Yeah, and around this time, you guys would be having your greatest night in baseball, or we'd be right around that point, and no toilet paper, no fun, no prizes.
Yeah, that's gonna be a weird day too, honestly. Labor Day weekend. Now that you say it, I hadn't even really thought of that, but that's normally the Sunday night before Labor Day. And that is, a great thing, especially because, the 3 years that I've been doing Grizzlies games, we've been, by some significant margin, if you combine the standings for those 3 years, the worst team in the league. And so it's nice to have something like that to look forward to at the end of the season. Because I think August, when you're 20 games out of first, right, or like my first year with the Grizzlies, we were 12-36 at the halfway mark of the season. Your season's over 3 weeks in at that point. It can be a grind a little bit in August when you're losing a lot of games. Guys are frustrated. There's not a whole lot at the end of the tunnel. It almost becomes our playoffs. Right. That last weekend is going to be good crowds, and it's sort of nice that often the most fun night of the season is the last one. I think that provides a good drive to keep the season going those last couple of weeks in August and push us forward. And it usually is a real highlight. And I think not coincidentally, because of what I just talked about, the Grizzlies tend to play very, very well that night. I believe we have won all 3 years, which is on Greatest Night of Baseball that I've been there, which is a statistical improbability considering the winning percentage overall has been somewhere between 35 and 40, right. And yet we've gone 3 for 3 in those games. And I don't think it's coincidence, when you get 6,000 people in the ballpark and guys are feeling like this is my last chance, to leave it all out there. I think it's a cool experience, including for visiting teams when the Otters have been there. Mm-hmm. What was that, year before last? I think the Otters won either the Friday night series opener or the Saturday night game 2 to clinch a playoff spot, and then the Grizzlies clobbered them on Sunday as the greatest night, and everybody won.
Because I made the trip that weekend, and so everybody was happy. The Otters took care of business and got the playoff bid, and then the Grizzlies were able to throw toilet paper in celebration and not in defeat. Yeah. So, hey, if weekends where both teams are happy, you can't really complain, right?
Yeah, and that's funny that you say that, the toilet paper in celebration and not in defeat, because, like I said, I've never been there for throwing the toilet paper after a defeat, which would be a weird vibe. Right. I think it would still be fun, but it's not the same if the last out is, the Grizzlies grounding out meekly to second base to end a 9-1 loss. Like that doesn't really have the same feel to it as finishing, the season on a high note, which luckily they've been able to do.
Obviously, the Frontier League was going to look very different this year. You mentioned the road trips and the traveling with the team. I mean, how excited were you to, venture out into either Canada or New York, depending on how the Grizzlies schedule was laid out?
I think it's always exciting to have new additions, especially considering that you get to do that instead of a trip to Normal, Illinois, for example. I would much rather try something new.
Right.
It's if I know I like something, I don't mind coming back. I enjoy coming back to Evansville. But once you know you don't like something, you might as well give something else a shot, right? And I think I said on the air a couple of years ago that Normal, going to the Corn Crib was the only ballpark I've ever been in that made me dislike baseball. And so I was really excited to get the chance to go to places that I thought would really make me like baseball. And I think clearly the Can-Am League has a good foundation in place, and they have some really nice, cool-looking ballparks. They have some nice variety, too, which I think at times, obviously, Evansville, a very significant exception in this way, but I think at times it's missing from the Frontier League just because ballparks have to be built in a way that makes the most sense economically. But I think sometimes that results in a lot of ballparks that look very similar to each other and feel very similar to each other. And the Can-Am League had a couple of older ones. I think it would have been really exciting to get up to Canada, and hopefully that will be a possibility at some point soon. Getting a chance to be in Quebec a little bit. I think that there's some really cool opportunities there for the kind of variety, whether it's ballpark-wise, whether it's culturally and getting to different areas of the country, or even getting to a different country altogether in an area where they speak a different language. I think all those things are sort of fun opportunities that, when the Frontier League has been a little bit more Midwest centralized, while that makes travel sometimes a bit more convenient, you don't get as much of the variety. So I was really looking forward to that. And I think, it's something still to look forward to, that whenever the Frontier League does come back, I think that's going to be a great addition to the league. And I'm really excited for everybody involved in it.
And plans for you, obviously, before the next baseball season. Like me, we wear a lot of different hats, and you do a lot of different broadcasting roles and assignments, obviously, in the off-season. With the COVID situation, I'm sure that's had some sort of an impact on your schedule here for the fall and winter.
Yeah, it has. So in the end, it had a really big impact in the spring, too, because I do a significant amount of Missouri baseball and softball for SEC Network Plus. Luckily, so as of now, my biggest assignments in the fall are doing Missouri stuff, their fall non-revenue sports are volleyball and soccer, and then doing Western Kentucky football. And both of those, as of now, are going ahead. The SEC just announced they're going to do a very slimmed-down soccer and volleyball schedule, but it will happen nonetheless. And Conference USA is going ahead with whatever football they can do. Now, from somebody in my perspective, because of how few games there are, if the Big Ten doesn't play, and certainly the Pac-12 looks like they're not going to play, Mountain West isn't going to play, that means ESPN and Stadium and all those kind of networks are hungrier to pick up those games, so it can sometimes limit the number of digital games that are available. Right. But I should have a game or two there. So actually, I think in the end, if all of this happens as it's scheduled right now, which obviously is a big if, but we're getting close enough that I feel relatively optimistic as compared to how I felt a month or two ago. I think I'll probably end up having a fall schedule that's not that different from from what it would have been otherwise. So that would be a big win, all things considered. I think a month or two ago, the fall looked a lot more dire than it does now. So hopefully that can be a step in the right direction, and then if we can get things back to normal-ish maybe by the spring, I think that's still a goal, still something that's not a guarantee, but a realistic goal to try to circle back to something more normal in March, April, May. And hopefully then we can end up looking back on this as a year that was in many ways a year from hell, but one to that was just sort of an extended blip on the radar. And that's my hope. I think when I keep coming back to, like, I wonder how this is going to affect us sports wise and just more society wise over the long term. 10, 20, 40 years from now, is this going to be something we remember? If so, is it because it challenged us in some ways, it forced us to reevaluate how we were looking at some things, or will it just be kind of, oh, remember that when that happened, like that really sucked, but that you just sort of, you'll end up remembering it as more like a week or a month of your life rather than a year. I'm hopeful that will be the case.
I can only speak for myself. I will remember this as more than just, that was weird, because I had to miss the Indianapolis 500 for the first time in 24 years. So 2020 hasn't been the best, but it is what it is. Nate, I'm obviously optimistic and hopeful we will run into each other at the ballpark in 2021. Obviously, it's a long way from then until now, but hopefully we'll have French League Baseball in 2021. We'll be able to catch up in person real soon.
I hope so, too.
All right, he's Nate Gatter, voice of the Gateway Grizzlies. I'm Zane Clodfelter. This has been Otters TV.